Welcome to History 601, Introduction to Public History, Week 4. This week we're going to look at a little video entitled High Tech Lincoln, and it was made in conjunction with the opening in April 2005 of the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum in Springfield, Illinois. And the wonderful thing about this museum is that it is a state-of-the-art facility, which is very interactive. In fact, you've read a couple of articles about it. It has received mixed reviews. And so without further ado, let's play the video.
Abraham Lincoln, a man for all ages. What might he think of his new presidential library and museum? It takes some cutting-edge liberties.
Do you think you're a handsome fellow?
Designed to provoke.
We didn't sign up to fight for no slaves, no sir.
Engage.
Slavery must be abolished.
And shed light on his legacy.
That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain.
History's too important to confine it to the 19th century communications tools that most museums confine themselves to.
Updating Lincoln's accomplishments is all in the storytelling.
Mr. President, Lincoln's efforts to dodge responsibility are dishonest.
The great debate now is whether using technology this way sells him short or does him justice.
I thought, this is absolutely wrong.
Well, this is our attempt to reinterpret him in a way the 21st century will find uniquely accessible.
Abraham Lincoln is moving into the 21st century. The 16th president is getting a makeover of sorts. He's being molded, illuminated, and going digital for his new look, showcased at the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum in Springfield, Illinois, Lincoln's hometown for 24 years, from 1837 to 1861. This $145 million facility exposes visitors to conflict.
Mr. Lincoln, signing that Emancipation Proclamation will dishonor our founding fathers.
That surrounded one of America's favorite presidents.
I bid you welcome.
Historian Richard Norton Smith, a political commentator who has run several presidential libraries, is at the helm here.
Well, there's high tech and there's high tech. I mean, a lot of people define high tech as video. And the fact is, we live in a video age. We're saturated with video. It would have been easy to create a museum with lots of push-button screens, lots of mini-movies, sort of an MTV, Lincoln. And I think to their credit, the designers went far beyond there.
Whether getting a new take on robots or seeing life down under the sea, today's museum exhibits are engaging, interactive, and very high-tech. That's why the architect and exhibit designers for the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum took their cues from increasingly popular attractions to create a friendly yet dignified atmosphere.
It was really a project that I really wanted to work on because he represented to me the whole idea of making our country free for everybody, not just whites, but everybody.
Right off the bat, the architect faced a major challenge. The exhibit creators didn't want any natural light to interfere with the 26 scenes they envisioned. So Gia Obata used towering glass panes to confine incoming light to the entrance. A short hall opens to a lofty rotunda ringed with windows that keeps daylight in a controlled space.
I was able to use a circle as an entry to the museum, and then a circle in the center of the building from where everybody could be oriented and go to the various exhibits.
As for size, the complex should do Mr. Lincoln proud. Over 2 square blocks accommodate the world's largest collection of pre-presidential Lincoln material. 46,000 square feet of the facility is targeted just for permanent exhibits alone. That's twice as much as any other presidential museum. In February 2001, when building gets underway, exhibit design ramps up some 2,000 miles away in California. All the exhibits are geared to be informative and have pizzazz.
Now,
Get ready, Mr. President, for the star treatment. In Burbank, BRC Imagination Arts teams with special effects wizards. It's led by Bob Rogers, a veteran of the Disney Company. Part of his job is knowing what brings in a crowd and keeps them coming back for more.
We want to make sure that the visitor makes that emotional and intellectual connection permanently between themselves, the life and times of Abraham Lincoln. That's our objective. We don't want to do anything less. To do less would be to fail that audience.
To do that, in this day and age, designers used every high-tech tool possible. Music and sound, for instance, might not seem complicated, but they set the mood for what visitors see.
You have different songs playing at any given time, and in certain areas of the museum, had it not been for the technology at our disposal, it would have been very difficult to design the musical solution that we ended up coming up with.
The composer's solution is based on something called MIDI, Musical Instrument Digital Interface. It connects electronic piano keyboards to computers. Picture the piano telling the computer to separate sounds.
To make sure that I wasn't going to get into any kind of clashes, what I was able to do, thank God for computers, is they orchestrated all at the same time.
Computers are a critical part of the museum. Touchpad technology encourages users to pick from a gallery of historical images and read about them. It's something the president might well have enjoyed.
Lincoln was interested in technology. He's the only president to have been awarded a patent for an invention.
Lincoln invented a newfangled buoy, but it never saw daylight. However, he was always interested in other people's inventions. On the White House grounds, his target practice with the new Spencer rifle made it standard issue for the Army.
It shows this interest to kind of roll up the sleeves and to try it out himself. The technology that we're employing in order to advance the Lincoln story is something that he himself probably would have approved.
As someone interested in the technology of his day, Lincoln would likely be amazed to see himself like this, as a holovision in Ghosts of the Library, where he emerges from the archives along with other historical figures.
We surveyed all of the existing presidential libraries, and to our complete surprise, absolutely none of them treated the subject of what is a presidential library.
What we tried to do was just metaphorically take people through that experience that a librarian might have, and let them see, how this really feels, to understand, what they're about, what stories they tell. It's pretty fun.
That these dead shall not have died in vain.
The ghosts interact with what appears to be a live librarian who's researching Lincoln's life.
Freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
The power of those words.
The vision for this began with a 3D computer model of the library space and a mock-up of Lincoln's ghost. Actors portraying Abe and Mary Lincoln are shot against a green screen background and then electronically scaled into a computer graphic before becoming ghostly. The onstage effects are magic.
sometimes in our imaginations, these people seem so real. If only we could meet them for a moment, ask them a question.
What we were able to do was come up with a technology that allowed the artifacts to actually emit visually the essence of what was hidden inside this thing.
The librarian pulls out a journal of a Civil War soldier. As he opens up that journal, out of the journal come the misty ghosts of the Civil War battle. very moving.
The death screams of wounded animals, the groans of their human companions, wounded and dying. Their oldest son, Robert, had his mother declared insane.
A ghostly twist also reveals mysteries suggesting what's hidden within the library's archives.
What was in them? But Robert burned all those things, or as many as he could find.
I think once we grab the audience and get them excited about what's going on, they're going to go out and they're going to learn more about Lincoln, learn more about American history, learn more about race relations, and that's our goal.
Information that promotes greater thought for visitors of all ages, that's what the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum is supposed to be all about.
Or is he a careful politician, publicly toning down his true sympathies?
We like to use technology in order to grab people and make them realize that history is not a bunch of old, dull, useless facts. It's really something that's going on, something that they're a part of.
However, the idea of extensively using technology stirs great debate. The question is whether this new museum is a place of scholarship or showmanship. Rarely is a museum honoring a great president controversial. Traditional scholars fear this high-tech Springfield, Illinois tribute to Abraham Lincoln might be a slickly packaged way to dumb down significant events.
We know from the experience of the science museums that they have a lot of gadgetry, and some people have remarked about how the kids go from one gadget to the next gadget and are pretty certain that they're not getting a whole lot out of that experience.
I think one of the most powerful museum experiences I've had in my life was at the Holocaust Museum in Washington, and they just have one of the cattle cars that took people to the concentration camps, and they don't have any technology. You just walk up some stairs into the cattle car and you feel what it must have been like, a little bit of what it must have been like to be herded onto this type of transport and not knowing where you're going, except that it was going to be very, very bad.
Supporters of the museum's approach believe the special effects will inspire greater curiosity about Lincoln and his presidency.
History is also a joyride. It's an opportunity to inhabit a different culture, a different place, a different time. It's a flying carpet into the past.
Well, technology is part of progress, as we call it, part of life. And if you're going to appeal to young people, you may as well use all of the tricks that makes The Lord of the Rings popular.
Gore Vidal, noted playwright and author of the best-selling historical novel Lincoln, thinks the president would approve.
I think he would have been delighted, particularly the means of getting information quickly. Here's a guy, I don't think he owned more than 4 books when he was growing up. And he was so curious about the world. I think he would have been thrilled by it.
Still, learning is the issue for both tech supporters and doubters.
We need to get people out to historic sites, meaningful places where meaningful events happened in our past, and use technology to enhance that experience, make it be more rooted in place, not less. We have a great story to tell. You don't have to Disneyfy it. You don't have to sugarcoat it. It's interesting on its own.
Much of the Lincoln saga is in gallery spaces occupied by a total of 47 realistic figures. When plans to showcase Lincoln in silicone instead of bronze was made public, historians found themselves at a divide.
When I first saw in a newspaper a photograph of Rubber Lincoln, I was irate. I thought, oh, this is absolutely wrong. This is a derivation of what's become common in our society. Pillsbury Doughboys, Ronald McDonald's, corporate logos of all sorts that have been translated into rubber or plastic for some sort of public entertainment, and it's so wrong for Abraham Lincoln.
We were initially criticized in using representational figures, which by no means is high-tech. What we wanted to use the representational figures for were in our immersive galleries, where we actually create a space that exists on the Lincoln landscape and give people a sense of that space and how it would look.
Museum visitors have their own thoughts on the issue.
Bringing in the figures of Lincoln and Murray Todd and them, it just all puts it all more together.
But I think it'll be very educational, whether you're 8 or you're 88.
The immersive galleries combine reproductions with authentic artifacts interwoven with some showbiz touches designed to make learning fun. There's illusion, sound effects,
You are as touched in the head as old Mary.
and lots of imagery. Technology subtly comes into play in the controversial life-size figures that depict Lincoln from his childhood to his assassination in 1865.
We've worked very hard on Abe, and we've taken a lot of time to try to get him right, to try to see what he really looked like. And this is a tough thing.
For nearly 7 years, more than 500 artists at BRC Imagination Arts in California literally lived with Lincoln. His face wallpapered their studio.
Every photo is slightly different. Some of them are so different you'd be hard-pressed to say it was the same guy. I've been looking at those photos for a long time, and we've really tried to find, who is this man?
The artists use all kinds of forensic techniques, from anatomical studies to computer modeling, to chart data pinpointing every telltale mark on Lincoln's distinctive face.
What we chose to do was start to look at him through drawing and try to, just really discover what are the elements of his face? What are the, how does his face move?
One of his eyes has a little drift to it. Some of the scars that he has on his face may have been from an earlier kick in the face from a childhood experience, and the way his lip is sort of turning at one particular point, so that on one side of his face looks like he's laughing or smiling, and then the other side looks like he's very serious and solemn.
His image is likely from 1857, when, at 48, Lincoln spoke out against the Dred Scott decision that denied freedom to all former slaves. The artist used this age as a baseline to create young and old figures.
For all the adult Lincolns, we started basically with that facial structure, and then we would work backwards or forwards in time and bring age to that, or make him younger by simply, smoothing the skin, giving it more, flash or depth.
A police sketch artist helped out regressing Lincoln back to his childhood to see how he probably looked as a 9-year-old boy. Lincoln and his contemporaries evolved from clay sculptures to molds and then into lifelike silicone and fiberglass figures. Height, weight, even dental work matches historical records.
This has been hand painted, and all of the hair is implanted individually, as with the eyebrows and everything. And the hair is actually real human hair. The brows and beard are synthetic. The eyes are actually prosthetic eyes. We'll position the eyes, and then a resin is added with a slight yellow tint, so that will, and we can actually add a little reddening as well.
A list of who's who joins Lincoln in getting the royal treatment. There's Stephen Douglas, his perennial political and debate opponent, abolitionist Frederick Douglass, Union leader General Ulysses S. Grant, even the president's assassin, John Wilkes Booth. All the president's men look real enough so that visitors often get up close and personal.
The attention to details in everything, from the exhibits to the paintings. When you walk in the door and you see the Lincoln family greeting you, I mean, come on.
In the plaza hub of the museum, admirers meet Mr. Lincoln's family for a photo opportunity.
We've sort of planned all that out. We have the spaces and the technical terms for all of the camera lenses to make sure that they line up with the figures, and then they can have a nice backdrop.
A picture with the president is rare enough, but equally as memorable is the chance to feel what Lincoln might have. As the saying goes, to truly learn about a man, you have to walk in his shoes. That's next. Everyone knows Abraham Lincoln's future, but a turn to the left is a walk into his past. Chronological storylines guide visitors through milestones defining Lincoln's life. Divided into a two-part journey, the pre-presidential years begins just off the museum's central plaza. The journey of Abe Lincoln begins in his boyhood home, the famous log cabin. Right away, visitors gain a sense of how today's art realistically imitates 19th century life.
The way that we achieved that effect is that we used a log cabin that was 200 years old. We found it in storage in a tobacco shed in West Virginia, and we had it pulled out and recut to form this very close replica to what we think Lincoln's log cabin looked like. It has this quality that really puts you into history.
The cabin's interior is bigger than the real thing to avoid crowding. It's fairly Spartan, but has one very special effect, a fireplace.
It would be a very bad idea to have any open flame in the same building that houses the handwritten Gettysburg Address. So, of course, these flames are cool to the touch.
High-tech details serve to punctuate certain events. For serious issues like slavery, dramatic lighting and sound sets the tone. The anguish of a family torn apart is clearly visible.
It just paints the picture in a nutshell.
This is an exhibit about one life, but a life that is in many ways a prism that tells you the story of an extraordinarily eventful and colorful era, a great war, a great bloodletting, a great human tragedy, but ultimately the country itself.
Museum leaders believe today's know-how brings a new dimension to the past.
And just as Lincoln has to be reinterpreted by every generation, so this is our attempt to reinterpret him in a way the 21st century will find uniquely accessible.
The chaos of a four-way presidential race continued.
Lincoln's drive for equality, coupled with an impending split of the nation, was all the buzz when he threw his hat in the Republican ring for the presidency.
Kept off the ballot in most southern states, the Republican campaign has largely bypassed the South.
A bank of monitors that appear to be in a TV control room fast-forwards Campaign 1860 to a contemporary audience.
That if Lincoln carries enough northern states, he can win in the Electoral College and take the White House without a single southern vote.
It's a dynamic transformation of a four-way race, as it might now be covered.
Abraham Lincoln.
We've made it so that audiences today can understand it because we've put it into the language of sound bites and negative television commercials that people use today.
Our goal is to make sure people are really excited and interested in the subject matter, and we'll use any tools we have to do that.
Washington politicians want to tell you how to live your life. They think Washington knows what's best.
Behind the scenes, directors and technicians filmed on an elaborate set. Shooting involves the same special effects techniques used in movies. Actors are shot against a green screen that's then electronically replaced with another backdrop. Once that happens, these politicians shake hands in the 1860s. The finished ads are slick. There are animated graphics and clever taglines.
A house divided against itself cannot stand.
One thing we really tried hard to do in the museum is to make sure that we use technology to really surround the visitors in the time and the moment, not just with sight, but with also what they were hearing, what they could touch around them, all five senses really.
Lincoln carries the day with nearly 2 million popular and 180 electoral votes. Heading for Washington, the president-elect leaves his constituency in Springfield, never to return. Digitally projecting the falling rain of February 11, 1861, layers this melancholy scene with foreboding. The second part of Lincoln's journey starts in the White House years. In the Blue Room, politics takes a backseat to style. In 1861, hoop skirts, bare shoulders, and lots of lace are all the rage. Producing similar period pieces quickly became a material issue when trying to copy First Lady Mary Lincoln's inaugural ball gown.
We had a couple of black and white photographs that were pretty good, but a little bit fuzzy, and we had a written description in Leslie's illustrated paper that gave us the one bit of color information we had, which is that there were black dots on the dress.
That's just one of the fabric finds needed. Embroidered silks, special fabrics at $400 a yard, and everyday cottons weave a tapestry of looks. Even military buttons had to be triple-checked for authenticity. Mary Lincoln's taste for the finer things in life didn't sit well with many folks.
Mrs. Lincoln is padding the household bills, and she's sneaking around with the gardener, John Watt.
Brutal comments dogged both Mr. and Mrs. Lincoln upon their arrival in Washington in 1861 on the brink of civil war.
Lincoln's brought to the presidency a heart reeking with malice.
In the Whispering Gallery, visitors must consider what it's like to have controversy as a constant companion.
Betrayer of his country and butcher of hundreds of thousands of people of the United States.
You can feel confused when you hear all these people talking, and it's not favorable about the Lincolns. They really didn't like them.
You're then immersed in a bath of public opinion, sometimes strident, shrill, angry, but also idealistic and hopeful, as America debates the meaning of the war, and really the meaning of America.
He says, if you speak against the war or try and stop men from enlisting in the Union Army, you'll be tried by court-martial.
Lincoln was elected with 38% of the popular vote, and his strategy was just to carry the North and to hell with the South. No wonder the South was upset. No wonder they left. You'll find out things like that in this library, and by treating those things as controversial issues, it begins to give you a modern perspective. After all, the history is too important to be left in the past. Update it. Make it real. Make it today. Make it urgent.
This war's gone far enough and has got to be stopped.
Time will tell whether technology adds or detracts from a visitor's experience.
I was really struck by and impressed by the deep emotions reflected in the different exhibits. And I was also struck by the historical flow of the exhibits.
The museum tempo does change from high-energy, thought-provoking exhibits to quiet, simple ones. The death of Lincoln's 11-year-old son, Willie, speaks volumes. Hosting a gala on the night of February 5, 1862, the couple's presence is split between the impending tragedy upstairs and their White House guests downstairs.
Lincoln was so grieved that 4 times during the war, he went to the crypt where Willie's body was and had the casket opened and looked upon the remains of his dead son. It probably strikes most people as being very macabre, but he obviously derived some comfort from that.
A spirited bit of technology is used to represent how death haunts Lincoln and the nation.
And he said they were all Lincoln's fault.
Animated ghosts rising from the battlefield puts a contemporary spin and emotion on the brutality of the Civil War. In 1862, the same year the Lincolns lose their son, other families weep too, as casualties near 150,000. As in any war, there's great debate. Portraying all sides, however, is another story.
Sir, this is an outrage. You are elected to end slavery.
Every grade schooler taught about slaves and the Civil War learns the president wants to free them. Now they have a chance to think more about this at the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum in Springfield, Illinois. The upshot is emancipation was no slam dunk.
Changing your mind and freedom can be restored. That was always our goal.
They may shock some people. They may offend some people. If they do, that suggests some of the progress that we've made. It may also suggest how much progress we have still to go.
and
White
that
soldiers won't
slavery
fight
is the
alongside
Negro's
Negro
natural and
recruits.
moral.
And besides,
Visitors clearly have to consider what's being said.
You keep at arm's length your most energetic friends, abolitionists like myself.
Citizens free float in the illusions corridor.
We want that job now.
In a short hallway, ricocheting opinions abound. Or in this case, surround.
You're married, so just because we didn't vote for you doesn't let you off the hook.
But does a high-tech look at 145-year-old issues seriously do them justice?
The thing that makes this museum different is not that it's a brand new approach in every single way. But what we've done that I think is really special is that we have taken the elements that you might see in any museum, but it's the way that they've been juxtaposed to one another.
Exhibit designers at BRC Imagination Arts in California really cranked up the volume for this virtual shout-out of free speech.
I have no other choice but to insist you step aside for the party's sake, and the sooner the better.
The voices are actually coming from monitors that are beyond a what we call a ghost glass system. We get an infinity effect of how many people are actually arguing for which point he should take.
every man wants to be free, and we want to be free in the country in which we were born.
These are all real remarks that we really can document. Some of them are wicked, nasty, devastating, awful things.
They asked me to tell you something. We didn't sign up to fight for no slaves, no sir.
It's a lot different from my experiences in class about him. It taught me a lot more about him than I knew.
A key idea here is that most of the opinions being expressed are not politically correct by today's standards.
Ask any soldier of what he thinks of the war, and he will answer, I don't like to fight for the damn Negro.
I came out to fight for the restoration of the Union and to keep slavery as it is.
Those sentiments probably loom large in Lincoln's mind, and as interpreted here, shadow over him to pack an emotional punch.
We're taking you out of being a person that's just watching it to participating in and feeling what it was like for him to make that type of decision.
Bloodthirsty criminals terrorizing the veterans.
What looks so simple turns out to be a well-coordinated effort with a full cast and crew. Actors hit their marks on raised platforms, but it's only their shadows that are filmed. Shot from extreme angles, they shrink or grow as projections representing the nightmare Lincoln wrestles with.
We sort of cut a lot of the text to a minimum. We keep the scenes to a point where as soon as you look at it, you get it. The story is there. It's obvious about what's going on.
Slavery is an abomination perpetrated by the wicked, cruel, and unjust minions of Satan.
Following a decisive Union victory, Lincoln issues the Emancipation Proclamation in January 1863, with no end in sight for the Civil War. Its timeline emerges visually thanks to an old standby, a map.
Today's audiences are very technologically savvy, and in order to engage them, we need to talk to them in a way that they understand given the current context.
This Civil War map telescopes the conflict that stretched from 1861 to 1865.
You can essentially watch the whole progression of the Civil War in 4 minutes and get an idea of what a massive conflict it was.
Animation makes it speed by, since 1 second represents a week of fighting. Condensing time this way graphically reveals how battle lines shift seasonally. Engagements rise with the temperature and slow down in the winter, when it's harder to travel.
Both my children came in here and really learned a lot. The technology did add to that.
What you will notice is that the casualty counter still keeps going in the winter because a lot of people died in the Civil War from not only being shot, but also from sickness and illness. There were huge amounts of illness that contributed to the casualty count in the Civil War.
Seeing the maps, how they moved to where we were winning and losing during the war and the lives that were lost until they're displayed in front of you and it really sinks in.
History duly recorded the slaughter at Gettysburg, largely in artwork. What many people don't know is the 1860s saw the advent of a hot technology, photography. A new breed of journalists documented the bloody war in black and white. War photos frame a gallery celebrating Lincoln's last victories. Years of conflict, however, take a visible toll. Then in a flash, Lincoln's life is cut short. A full-scale replica of the Capitol, where his coffin lay in state, shrouds visitors in a reflective moment. As for the real artifacts housed in the museum and library, a sampling are in the low-tech Treasures Gallery.
There's a real danger that technology can distance you and actually alienate the audience from the story that you're trying to tell. It's our goal to use the technology as an additional character within the story itself. It's not about the technology itself, it's about what that technology imparts to the guest.
That's why exhibit designers let so many historical effects speak for themselves. Mary's jewelry, young Willie's toy cannon, even Lincoln's glasses are simply displayed. Traditional historians like this direction.
It's better to show young people letters actually written by Abraham Lincoln. Their imaginations are not captured by gee-whiz technology, but show them a hat Lincoln once wore, and they'll stand and they'll be amazed. They'll be enraptured with it. I can assure you of that.
Most revered, perhaps, are authentic documents that shaped America. Visitors can read the Emancipation Proclamation and the Gettysburg Address. Contrasting the museum's 21st century technology, the library is a serious treasure trove for research.
It serves a number of audiences. Genealogists, anyone interested in Illinois history, because it's all here. 12 million documents, thousands of books, microfilm on the mile. We have a 47,000 item collection, which is regarded as the finest for the pre-White House Lincoln.
In other words, everyone gets to experience Lincoln's full measure of devotion in his or her own way. What Lincoln saw over the years is shared by one and all in a virtual showcase of explosive technology. That's both magical and memorable. Touted as the most high-tech presidential museum to date, the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum owes its existence to computer capabilities. Who would guess the total computing power here is over 10 million times that of what was on board the Apollo 11 spacecraft that first landed men on the moon? Gigabytes get a workout center stage off the plaza in a 3-screen show in the Union Theater called Lincoln's Eyes. This 250-seat venue treats audiences to a special effects extravaganza.
Young Abraham was born into a life of hardship.
An artist who paints the president's portrait juggles with the emotions he detects in the president's eyes.
Great sorrow and joy. Look at this. Smiling Lincoln, sad Lincoln.
The 16-minute show was 6 years in the making. "25 actors in green screen limbo portray citizens from all walks of 19th century life: politicians, housewives, slaves, soldiers, and townsmen.
Hang these traitors! We can't let them push us around. Hang these traitors!
The show, besides doing a lot technically, uses different points of view to show all these things, and we use different theatrical devices to give each point of view a different kind of emotional sensibility, resonance.
Even Lincoln's head gets a touch-up before becoming a storytelling tool. Moving from inception to its final form, the painter wanders among those buried as Richmond, Virginia burns in the chaos of the Civil War.
These are effects, flame effects, different combinations of things. There'll be another one over here. All of a sudden you get more burning in the center stage. It's going to happen right now. The seats are shaking. There's a real sense of being there. Explosions now. A couple hundred lights all moving at different speeds. 30, 40 different line sets, as well as different special effects, fans, smoke, fire, all sorts of different elements.
Here's where computer graphics rock. 680 real pictures from the 1800s move every which way, illustrating the painter's storyline.
He was kind to everybody.
There's no film used. It's all digital.
And as things go up and down, you'll see projections on scrims that appear to float out in front of one another, and it creates almost a 3D effect that doesn't require glasses. People are going to wonder by the end of that if they're looking at real things or are they looking at holograms.
Occasionally, Mr. Lincoln would arrive in the office, and I could see it in his eyes that he'd been crying.
Of course, the special effects are icing on the cake, drive the points home, but pretty powerful. Makes you think.
Behind the scenes is a technology fiesta. 350 miles of cables, switch boxes, rows of hardware, link upon link, all crucial to nonstop 3D and dramatic lighting effects.
Computers have really completely changed the way we tell stories in theaters. They have provided us the ability to synchronize great numbers of elements that previously would have had to do by hand and through a stage manager calling out a lot of different cues.
On April 14, 1865, John Wilkes Booth succeeded in taking Abraham Lincoln's life, but he failed to end the president's popularity. Interest in him has never died.
Lincoln lives in a way that I don't think any other American historical figure does. Lincoln is a one-man Mount Rushmore. And every generation is going to redefine him and rediscover him. One reason why Lincoln continues to fascinate is because he's such an elusive man. And there is no doubt that he was, in some ways, very humble. It isn't Lincoln's hard-scrabble upbringing that he celebrates in his great state papers. It's a system of government and a culture that allows people to escape that environment.
So many of the questions that Lincoln considered, from human rights to national politics and even family responsibility, resonate today.
What we're trying to do here is to bring history to life, to demonstrate how it matters, and to use a whole host of exhibit techniques, storytelling techniques. Great history, among other things, is great storytelling. We have a great story to tell, and we're trying to tell it in a way that people will find engaging, both emotionally and intellectually.
In this statement of principles, he again expresses his belief that the Declaration of Independence is the root from which sprang American democracy.
Lincoln still has lots to say, and, in a manner of speaking, the public can choose a topic to question him.
My paramount object in this struggle is to save the Union. It is not
Some pre-programmed requests are off the beaten path.
Are you related to the actor Tom Hanks?
Tom Hanks would not be born until 411 years after Lincoln was assassinated.
There is historical documentation for every answer to learn about a man who believed in using advances of his day.
Abraham Lincoln was born February 12, 1809. His father, Thomas, married Nancy Hanks.
The technology is also appropriate in that Lincoln lived at a time of great change. The railroad was the dot-com of its day. People who invested in railroads made a great deal of money. Fortunes were also lost in failed railroads. The telegraph, this magic device which allowed people to communicate from one end of the country to the other. And one of the galleries in the museum shows him in the telegraph office bringing, as he called it, the awful arithmetic. And that is casualties from the battlefront to Washington. We don't want to keep Lincoln in the past. We want to make him relevant to today and a part of your life today.
And that's what we've set out to do.
Every generation projects onto Lincoln its priorities, its idiosyncrasies, its cultural and political and social agenda. So in the end, it isn't so much what we learn about Lincoln as what Lincoln tells us about ourselves.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that, and